So what we do on Wednesday, we connect to the weekly Torah portion and we learn practical lessons. We're going to speak about altruism tonight. If it's possible to do a selfless act, if it's really possible. And that's why it's so relevant, because especially England are going into lockdown tonight around the world. You know, very much it's a COVID reality right now. You might think it's a time of isolation and loneliness. But like we learned a few weeks ago in the flood of Noah, when there's a catastrophe in the world, what Hashem wants more than anything is kindness. He wants love. He wants altruism. He wants Avram Avinu's midah of chesed. That's what Noah saved him and his family in the ark. For 1 year of their lives, they fed animals 24/7. That's what kept them alive. And I believe that's what Hashem wants in generally, and especially in times like a pandemic. We need to really step up to the plate and be more united and achieve more chesed. And we're really going to learn exactly how that works tonight through the lenses of Avram Avinu. And I really hope if you please God, stay with us, it's going to be super transformative for you and inspirational. So here we go. First of all, a little bit of the midrash, a bit of the background, what's going down in Vayera. So last week in Lech Lecha, Avram was 75. Tonight, it's 24 years later. Avram Avinu is now, Mazel Tov, 99 years old. He's 99. And remember, it's not like a 99 today, because he lived for 175. So he was a little bit more, let's call it middle-aged. Maybe you might say, like me. And Hashem just commanded him to do circumcision, bris milah. He'd done the ordeal of Lech Lecha. Now Hashem waited for the right time, for the right moment, for him to do brit milah, for him to do circumcision, to make the covenant. Obviously, an 8-day-old baby, it's a little bit easier to agree to be circumcised than a 99-year-old man, but he was well up for it. And 3 days later, this is when we start Vayera. Just a little bit of the background, what he was doing prior in those 24 years. He was doing a lot of what we call kiruv. He was trying to inspire humanity to believe in God, to be monotheistic, to be good and kind, to do chesed. And he actually started the first Chabad house, ostensibly. You know, he was doing kiruv before the Rebbe and before Aish and before Sameach. He started a house called Eishel, Aleph Shin Lamed, and that stood for Achila, eating, Shasiyah, drinking, Leina, sleeping. Meaning he created like a Hotel Abraham, which by the way, is super cool. If any of you go to Hebron, there's a malon called, Hachnasat Avram Avinu. So he literally had his own hotel. And he let people stay and eat and drink. And why do you think when you go to Jewish events, there's always food and drink? Avram Avinu knew that shtick 4,000 years ago. And he would just say, the catch is, just before they ate, he said, you know what, where does the food come from? I didn't make it personally myself or my wife. It came from Hashem. If it wasn't for God, we wouldn't be able to eat. Let's make a bracha. And he taught the idea of blessings. That was his whole shtick, to try and teach monotheism, to try and teach Shema, Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. That was Avram Avinu's shtick. So he was running this Eishel, and now Hashem said, now it's time for the covenant. You're ready for the next level. You're ready now for the bris. So he had the bris, and 3 days later, this is when this week's Sedra kicks in. Let's look over the verse. So anybody wants to check out Genesis, chapter 18, verse 1, and do it with me. Lama lo. Let's do it. So, says the Torah, Vayera Elov Hashem. Hashem appeared to him. This is the parsha called Vayera. Vayera Elov Hashem. By the way, that's unique. Normally it says, Vayera Hashem El. And God appeared to. It doesn't say it this time. It says, and appeared to him, Hashem. Because sometimes we hit the level in spirituality where we almost fuse with Hashem. We become co-partners with Hashem. We become part of that oneness. And Avram Avinu, after the circumcision, got to that level where he's now becoming part of that oneness. Is the Aruch HaKadosh. That's why it doesn't say, Vayera Hashem el Avraham. Abraham now Avram Avinu got to that level of that almost oneness and unity with Hashem. And that's what elevated him as a result of the Brit Milah, and he got to an incredible level of enlightenment at that moment. And it says it happened in the Elonei Mamre, for who Yoshev, and he was sitting, and it says it in the present tense, Pesach ha'ohel, at the entrance of the tent, k'chayim hayom, at the heat of the day. There's a Zohar. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai writes something amazing which super inspired me. It says that this is also, in the Torah is always referring on many layers. Many, many layers. So not only was this a past event happening 4,000 years ago in Israel, it also is happening for who Yoshev in the present tense. Says the Zohar, today, tonight, Avram Avinu is sitting outside Gehenna, outside the entrance of hell. Kachom Hayom, at the heat of the day, which is the illusion and the remes to Gehenna itself. And he's there sitting, trying to schlep people out, saying to Hashem, I don't want them to suffer. They've suffered enough. Let's get them out. Let's schlep them out. Let's schlep them out. He's trying to inspire and help and unify his Jewish brethren even today. Today, that's what he's doing. Amazing Zohar. Amazing. Which again now tells us, now in this world, now thank God we're alive in Olam Hazeh, how much more so when people have free will is it important to us to inspire, for us not simply to say, hey, I'm okay, it's all okay. We should be saying, what can we do to share spirituality? What can we do to share Shabbat? What can we do to share the mitzvah? That's the mission of Avram Avinu, which we need to take on today. So at any rate, it says he's sitting on the entrance at the heat of the day. Lesson for you, if it ever talks about the weather in the Torah, please know that's not natural weather. You see, the Torah is not a weather forecast. It's not like going to AccuWeather on Google and checking out, what's the weather? I wonder what the weather was like that day. The three angels came to Abraham. Was it foggy? Was there a rainbow? We don't care normally. So the fact that it talks about the weather means it's supernatural weather. And as Rashi says, Kachom Hayom, at the heat of the day, so those of you in Tel Aviv, you know how hot it is on a July day, even hotter than that. Even it was a crazy, crazy hot. It was a supernatural heat to try and get Avram Avinu to go to bed. Why? Because Avram Avinu is 99 years old. He just had circumcision. So there's a time, Hashem says, when you're meant to be out there giving, and there's a time you can receive a bit. And Hashem says, let me come to you. This, explains Rashi from the Medrash, is the first example of the big mitzvah that we need to do, especially in today's COVID world, called Bikur Cholim. Visiting the sick. Hashem came to visit Abraham. Abraham was sick. And he came to visit Avraham Avinu. We learned Bikur Cholim from Hashem. Problem was, Avraham Avinu was kind of the worst patient ever. He's like, nah, it's not convenient, God. Like, can you go back another time? And Hashem's like, no, I'm God. You're the patient. Get to bed. And Avraham Avinu is like, no, sorry, it's super. How do we even understand this? The third verse of this week's Sedra says, Abraham says to Hashem, don't come in now. It's really inconvenient. I've got work to do. There's idolaters out there that need to be looking after. It's a hot day. And Hashem said, okay, get to bed. And he made it so hot that he tried to show Abraham that Avram Avinu, go to bed. I don't want you to be outside. Go. And Avram Avinu is not budging. He is stubborn with a capital S, because he has such a mission to do kindness and he understood that's what Hashem wanted. And we're going to have to try and work out, how did Avram Avinu know that you're meant to diss God? I don't know why I'm saying this, but today in the Commons, the ex-Prime Minister, she's not old, the ex-Prime Minister, Theresa May, got up and tried to speak, and Boris Johnson walked out. How rude, right? He just walked out. So can you imagine you're having your dinner and you get a knock on the door and it's the Queen of England, and the Queen says, I've come and have a little chat. I'm doing my little duty of talking to the citizens of the country. And you would turn around to the Queen and say, Queenie, not convenient now. Obviously Trump wouldn't be doing it in America now, he's a little bit busy, but the Queen ostensibly could be knocking on our door tonight. And can you imagine the audacity to say, Queen, please go away. Avram Avinu declined God. He said to Hashem, it's really inconvenient, Hashem. How did he know he can do it? You see, in spirituality, there's always a hierarchy. If you've got two mitzvot, we have a hierarchy of which one comes first. How did Avram Avinu know that it was more important to look after guests than to look after God? Big question. So we're going to try and explain that. Let's just look at more of the verse. Next verse, it says, Pasuk Bet, Vayisayinav, and he lifted up his eyes and he saw. And behold, there were three men in front of him. And again, there's a Zohar which says this was kind of like a parallel universe going on. Sometimes in life, we see many dimensions. And the Zohar says Avraham Avinu at that point was so enlightened, he now saw the three men, as well as the angels, were Avraham and Yitzchak and Yaakov. He saw himself. It was like he was watching outside of himself, looking in, seeing his potential and his connection to the spiritual Kabbalistic Sfirot. He saw him master Chesed. He saw Yitzchak master justice. He saw Yaakov master Tiferes, balance. And he was seeing the spiritual potential of the forefathers. That's what the Zohar says, whatever that means. But ostensibly, pshat-wise, it means he saw these three men. But it said he lifted up his eyes and saw. Why say both? You see, in Torah, every word is important to teach you that he was on the lookout. Just like maybe some of you, if you ever looking to catch the bus, right? There's no bus, but you're looking out. Where's the bus? Where's the bus? Where's the bus? And then the moment you stop looking, it comes, right? So Avraham Avinu is now looking out. Why? Because his mission is to have guests. And if no guests are there, let's create some guests. Now, why is that? That's seemingly really bizarre. Why is it that Avraham Avinu was so passionate about finding some guests? Normally this mitzvah, which he did, called Hachnasat Orchim, looking after guests. The normal way you do that is people are in need. There's someone out there that's got nowhere to go. So, okay, let me look after them. There was no one. It was the hottest day ever. There was no one out there. But yet Avraham Avinu, the amazing Midrash says, Avraham was distressed. He was in pain that there was no guests. Most people are in pain when they do have guests. What does it mean that he was in pain when there was no guests? Because, my dear friends, Avraham Avinu's essence was to give, to give, to give, to give. So when someone's a real giver, the moment they're not giving, it actually hurts. Your mission is being prevented. Any of you who've really worked out what your spiritual mission is, actually when you're not doing it, you feel stuck. You feel like this isn't right. You're like this waterfall that wants to be gushing, this like flow of a river. Avraham Avinu is like flowing giving, and there's no one to give. We've got to find someone to give. We've got to find someone to give because that's who I am. That's what's needed. And it's an amazing line. He was, we should be distressed. Those, especially in the UK and even in Israel. In America, who's, I'm sure anywhere in the world, you can't really have loads of guests. Maybe apart from like Greece. But generally, I don't think there's anyone on Greece tonight. If anyone in Greece is watching tonight, please let me know. But generally, around the world, we can't have guests. We should be distraught. We should be like, Hashem, we need to give. Please end COVID now so we can do Hachnasas Orchim. Instead of maybe what some people are doing, like, wow, what a machaya. I can just relax on a Friday night now. I don't have to do big cooking. I can just like spend time with myself. God forbid to be thinking that. We've all really got to have that same mission of Avraham Avinu to look after guests. You should know, Kabbalistically, it's one of the highest things you can do. I don't know if you know the Midrash says Avraham Avinu wore this amulet. And this was like a healing amulet. It would heal people. And many tzaddikim and chassidim say if someone's really ill, if anybody here is, God forbid, got family members who are ill, one of the beautiful sugulot is to do hachnasat orchim. Because the mystics say whenever any of us look after guests, at that point, Avraham Avinu, the pioneer of the looking after guests spiritual essence, comes and joins with you with his amulet, and it can heal people. So one of the best skulot for healing is actually to look after guests and to be involved. So if you look after guests, do Achnasas Arachim, and then ask for a refuah shalema for someone, watch it work. It's really an amazing skula. Now, why was it that Avraham Avinu knew that this was greater than being with Hashem? For the following obvious now reason. You see, to be one with Hashem, if we're being a taker, we're nothing like Hashem. The way we become one with Hashem, really in love with Hashem, really united with Hashem, is when we emulate Hashem, explains the Ramchal in Derech Hashem. When we act like Hashem, when we do good like Hashem. So Avraham Avinu understood that's really what Hashem wants. I know Hashem's coming to visit me, but he doesn't really want that. He's testing me. He's waiting to see how much, how much do I want it? How much do I want it? That is what he's waiting to see. So that's how he knew that really to emulate Hashem, you become more connected to Hashem than if we're just receiving from Hashem. Finally, watch this amazing thing. The Pasuk says that he's sitting down, and then all of a sudden, Vayarot, he starts running. It says Vayar, Vayarot. He saw and he started running. It missed out a word. Anyone want to write in what the word is? When you're sitting down and you see, what word should it have said in the Bible? It should have said Vayakam, and he arose. It should have said, and he got up. It didn't say he got up. Why? Because, as my Rabbi Vishman explained to me in yeshiva, he was sitting down and then he ran. He literally ran from a sitting position. Can't really demonstrate that in my room with Zoom. I mean, with on this, it doesn't really work. But you get the idea. He zoomed off from the sitting position because he had such what's called zorizos, such enthusiasm to do the mitzvah. He's already running. And in fact, the next verse starts talking about how straight away he's now passionate. Straight away he's saying, run, run, run. He says to Sarah, let's quickly make the food. He goes to Yishmael, quickly go and get it. Everything's running. He's running and hurrying. And in fact, the Zohar explains from the Medrash that, you know what? Avram started running and the cow started running and he started following the cow. And the cow actually went to a place called Hebron and went to the cave of Machpelah. The cow got to the cave of Machpelah, showed Abraham at that point the grave of Adam and Eve. And that's how, says the Medrash, Abraham knew where Adam and Eve were buried and he clocked that. And that's why after the story in next week's Sedra, when he wants to bury his wife, he understands he needs to bury in the place where heaven meets earth. That's the idea of Gan Eden. It's the place where in the spiritual world meets the physical world. And that all came from that zorizos, that enthusiasm, this enlightenment. He's done the bris milah. He's now giving when almost it's superhuman to do that. Hashem then really opens up your eyes. And again, for us in our life, when we go that extra mile when it's really hard, when the Yetzer Hara just wants to give up, when we're like, I'm done. And then you keep on going, as we learned last week, instead of lech lecha, call it lech lech. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. When your Yetzer Hara is like, I'm done, and then you keep going and you go through that extra mile, you go through the wall, that's when you do amazing things in life. And that's when Hashem brings you a lot of divine help. So this is kind of the paradigm of this act of chesed, kindness. This is one of the greatest examples where we see of kindness. And isn't it interesting, right? He then feeds the angels. I don't know if you know, angels don't get hungry. Angels aren't like us. They're not hungry. They don't eat. So what does that mean? That the quintessential act of chesed was to feed an angel, but actually, he was kind of, when in Rome, they pretended to eat, but he didn't even give them anything they wanted. And by the way, it's amazing because there's a piece of Talmud in Shabbat, I think page 88, which says that when Moses went to heaven, initially the angels were upset that why is there a human in heaven? Hashem made Moses' face look like Abraham, and they said, whoa, we owe you one. We're so indebted to you. And then they started being nice to Moses because they saw he also was kind of Abraham too, whatever that meant. But the point is, they were indebted because, and this is now the point, when you do an act of kindness, it's not just about who's receiving it. It's about why you're doing it. It's about the giving. If the giving is pure, as we're going to see soon, if it's altruistic, if it's coming from your heart, it doesn't matter if it works or not. It doesn't matter if the recipient gains too much or not. Hashem's waiting to see, are you giving? How many times maybe you tried in life to give and it didn't really work, and you might have thought, oh, what a waste of time. God forbid to think that way. Because the goal of giving is to erode the ego and get close to Hashem and just do this incredible act of giving. You know, Rabbi Dessler says it's better to give $1,000 1,000 times, like separately, $1, than to give $1,000 at once. Why? Because if you give $1,000 at once, by the way, if anybody wants to give me $1,000 at once to J Network, that would be nice. But if you just give $1,000 at once, that's one act. It's nice, it's great. But every time you put your hands in your pocket and you do the act of tzedakah, unbelievable. Because every time you do that, it's eroding the ego more, eroding the ego more, eroding the ego more. And that's the idea. Avraham Avinu was giving to angels food which they didn't need, but that wasn't the point. The point was he was giving from the highest, most purest place. And let's learn about that, because you see in philosophy, we need to understand giving. So a few points. Rabbi Dessler, for example, explains, is there such thing as altruism? Is it possible to do a selfless act? We'll get into that in a moment, but he says, for example, when you're working, how many people when they're in business, is it anything but altruistic? It's all about me. It's all about what can I get? What can I get? How can I make money? How can I get fame? How can I get power? How can I get control? And therefore, Rabbi Dessler says it's so important when you're at work to spiritualize the work, to be caring for the recipient at work. Don't be in sales just for your commission. Be in sales because you genuinely care about the recipient. So, le dogma. Rabbi Dessler brings two examples. He brings an example first of the Chofetz Chaim, the great Rav Yisrael Meir HaKohen Kagan. The Chofetz Chaim, probably the greatest spiritual giant we've had in the past 150 years, which, by the way, you can check him out on YouTube. He was schooled up in YouTube in 1925. If you go to Chofetz Chaim footage, and you'll see, just you have to wait, and then when you see this sage who doesn't want to be in the camera, who's just looking really low, he's walking like this, because he's so humble, he's genuinely humble. So the Chofetz Chaim, when he was working, he was initially selling books, and he used to go around pretending not to be him. Just there's this rabbi, I'm selling his book. I'm selling this book called the Chofetz Chaim. He didn't want to be him. Eventually everyone realized that was him. And then everyone wants the book and the autograph, so he was embarrassed about that. So he started a shop, selling books in the shop. I think he sold some more Judaica as well, more like a Torah treasures kind of shop. But he became so successful because people realized, oh my gosh, that's the great Chofetz Chaim. He started making so much money, he was upset for his competitors. It's not fair on them. So he started closing up the shop early. Now, who would do that? You know, Tesco, whoa, we're making more than Waitrose. That's not cool. Let's kind of like limit it. Who does that? Chofetz Chaim did that, and then he closed up to half day, and then everyone's cramming in the morning, and then eventually he closes, he's open for 2 hours a day, and then I think eventually he kind of gave up. So we see clearly, says Rabbi Dessler, that's the way we should work. We should be working to give, not working to take. And he used another example of Chanoch. It says that Chanoch walked with Hashem. Why? He was a shoe maker. He made shoes. Says the Midrash, when he made the shoe, every stitch in the shoe he was doing, I want the client to be really joyous and happy when he wears this. He cared so much for his clients. At that point, it was out of such love and giving that Rabbi Dessler explains he was in one with Hashem. He became unified with Hashem. So step one for us, everybody, especially those of us who are in work, really genuinely, altruistically care about your clients. Care for them. That's the number one part of being a spiritual businessman, says Rav Dessler. But let's get to this idea. Is it even possible? Is it even possible to do kindness in an altruistic way? You see, I put some of that, I don't know if you saw on our Facebook and Instagram, there was a nice little Friends clip. Is there such thing as a selfless act? It's a very famous question. A lot of scientists and philosophers have their say, and they basically say there is no such thing as altruism. We're egos. So even when you do a really nice act, there's selfish gain. There's selfish attachment one way or the other. For example, let's think. You know, if anybody wants to put in a comment right now of a really nice act you've done, and then if you think it was altruistic or not. Because I think about it, that let's say, you know, it's going to be my mum's birthday next week. So when I go and buy her a gift and a card, I can't say that's altruistic because my life wouldn't be worth living if I forgot her birthday. She's ingrained that into me from 0 years old. Don't forget my birthday, don't forget my birthday. So it's anything but altruistic. There'll probably be a tremendous amount of guilt would go into that act of giving. So how many times do you do things out of guilt? Especially as we're Jewish, which by the way, Jewish shouldn't be about guilt, but some of us have that Yetzer Hara. What about in work? If you ever do a really nice, kind act for your boss, forget about it being altruistic, because the back of your mind, subconsciously, or probably at the forefront of your mind, you're doing it for a raise. You're doing it to suck up to the boss. You're doing it because you want a bigger, fatter contract next year. So, if any ladies there, if a handsome young man once comes and opens the door for you and lets you in, again, is it really altruistic when men act for women and women do nice things for men if they fancy each other? That's also not going to be altruistic. You start thinking about it, it's actually very hard to start thinking, is there anything which is altruistic? I'll tell you something more. When I have a lot of clients who may be sad or depressed or feeling low, often will say mystically, get involved in giving, get involved in giving. It's gonna start creating happiness. Once again, that won't be altruistic because they're doing it to feel better. So sometimes we do acts of kindness to feel better. Sometimes we'll do acts of kindness because you have this afterglow feeling afterwards, like you're feeling, oh my gosh, I feel amazing now. I feel like fulfilled. Which, by the way, it's so important to have that feeling. Like, that's one of the good litmus tests to know if you're doing the right thing. I'm hoping, with Hashem's help, the Torah we're going to learn tonight, and by the end of tonight, your neshama is going to be full up. You're going to feel, amazing. It's like you're a plant which has been watered, and you're going to feel a sense of inner fulfillment and wholesomeness. That's a beautiful feeling. But vis-a-vis the question of, is there such thing as a selfless act? Can chesed be genuinely selfless? You could argue that it can't be if you have that afterglow, that feeling good about yourself afterwards. Moreover, those of us who believe in the afterlife, who understand that reward for our mitzvot are going to be in the afterlife, and the more kind you are, the way bigger reward you're going to get. Once again, how can it be altruistic if I know that I'm going to spiritually gain for eternity, which is way better than gaining in this world? Is that altruistic? And my daughter there is asking if to give to a spouse. So please, darling, give to your spouse, give to Ari 24/7. Just have to say that's probably not going to be altruistic. Why? Because you're in a relationship, you're in a marriage, and the more you give to him, he's going to give you back. And he will normally give you back a lot more the more you give to him, because you're going to gain something back immediately, or in 5 minutes, or in 10 minutes, or in an hour. How many times do we say, I'll look after you, now you have to look after me? And so therefore, people in families and relationships, I think it's really, a bigger question to my daughter would be, she obviously likes it, would be if you give to your children. If a parent giving to a child, when you give to Shani, is that altruistic? Well, once again, that's a bit more interesting. But once again, we love our children so much, it's almost an extension of ourselves. And therefore, you would feel bad about yourself if you wouldn't give to your child. And B, you're hoping maybe one day Shani's going to look after you the way my wife is hoping you're going to look after her. Right? So therefore, I'm not sure if it's altruistic when a parent even looks after a child. I'm not sure. So is there such thing as altruism? Is it really even possible to do a selfless act? Anybody like to give another example of a selfless act? You can now write in on Instagram, on Facebook, on the J Network page or the Avi Hill page. Would you like to write in? Give me a message. Come on, anyone come up with a altruistic act for me so I can examine it. What do you say, anyone? What do you say? So, I can't take all your comments. It's too much. It's too overwhelming. So I better go on. But I'm happy to take your comments a bit later if you are less shy. So here we go. Let me give you what Rabbi Dessler says. So again, the secular perspective is we're ego, and obviously ego's attached, and therefore forget about altruism. It's a fantasy, it's a dream, doesn't going to happen. I'd like to share with you a different perspective, my friends. First of all, it's about definition. First of all, it all depends on, what's up, Mandy? Nice to see you. So visiting the sick. So it depends, Mandy. If you would visit the sick, and it was someone that you, back of your mind, could be hoping they're going to visit you one day, that's not altruistic. If it's someone that you're going to say, I better go, because if not, I'm going to feel so guilty for not going. It's your grandmother. And how rude is it not to go and see your grandmother? You're going to be in such trouble if you haven't visited. So sometimes we visit out of guilt. Sometimes you might be visiting because actually if you do it, you're going to feel so good about it. Or you could do it, and this one of the biggest mitzvahs is to visit the sick. We just learned this week, Sedra, Hashem visits the sick. So my point is, there are many ways which could disable the altruism. Just by the way, just to explain, if someone does an act which isn't altruistic, it's still a mitzvah. Please still do it. It's still amazing. I'm just wondering, is there even possible? Is it even feasible to hit altruism? So Rabbi Dessler explains the following. It depends on the definition. If you say altruism means, is there an act where there's no selfishness at all, either prior, during, after, meaning no selfishness attached to it in one way or the other, then in a sense, it's never going to be altruistic because we're still human, as the song goes. But I'm human. I'm not going to sing it tonight. But if, which according to Kabbalah, an action is defined by its motivation, your ratzon, why you do it, defines the action. Your catalyst, your purpose, then it is possible, in Mandy's case, to visit the sick in an altruistic way. It is possible to care for people in an altruistic. And just big comment from Georgina, 1 second, helping someone who fell in the street, for example. Nice. But again, Georgina, they fell in the street, and how rude it is if you don't go and help. Because people are watching, and there's cameras, and there's Instagram, and all sorts. So some people, I'm sure, help people in the street almost instinctively out of also guilt or fear. But on the other hand, I do agree with you, because Rabbi Dessler says, even though that is possible, we have a soul, and that soul's part of God. And just like Hashem is altruistic, Hashem created the world out of altruism. When Hashem came to Abraham, it was out of altruism to visit the sick. And when Avraham went and visited the guests, as I said, first of all, there was no one there. Second of all, they were then angels. He wasn't doing it for gain. He was doing it to give. Ironically, he gained tremendously. He gained tremendously by being told he's going to have a baby next year. He gained tremendously by his nephew being saved. He gained tremendously. There were 3 angels. Raphael healed him from his Brit Milah. He got medicine. Gabriel went and helped save Lot. Sorry, Raphael went and saved Lot. Gabriel actually went to destroy Sodom, but Michal told him the good news that they were going to have a baby. So he did gain, but he didn't do it for the gain. And Georgina, that's the point. The point is, why do we do things? And it's such an interesting question to ask yourself. Oh my gosh. Why do you have guests? Why do you pray? Why do you give charity? Often we do it for personal gain. We do. Again, there's nothing wrong in that. It's great. It's rather that than doing sins. It's beautiful. Keep up doing it for non-altruistic motives if that's where we are. But let's try and go higher to the level of Avraham Avinu. Let's try and hit that level, my dear friends. My dear brothers and sisters and my daughters even there. That let's get to that level where we do a mitzvah just because we should, because it's the right thing, because we're givers, we've got Hashem in us, we've got kindness in us, and let's just flow with that kindness irrespective of what's coming our way, unconditionally. That's the goal. And by the way, back to Prophet's question, maybe it is then possible to do an act of altruism for your husband if you're hitting such a beautiful, high, spiritual, enlightened place that you're just instinctively in that flow of giving. You're just flowing the giving for no ulterior motives. You're not thinking about it. And by the way, that's the problem sometimes, thinking. Sometimes we overthink. If we can just learn how to go with the flow. There's an energy to give, just go. Let's not make calculations. Too many people calculate. Let's not calculate, let's just go with it. And let me give you examples for Dessler's theory. Example number 1, just a little one for me. Again, it's not the biggest example, but I was once having some guests on Shabbat when I was in London, and one of my guests after Shabbat said, Rabbi, can I have a lift home? And I said, sure. So I took him in the car, and I said to him, where am I taking you? And he said, Essex. Now, for those who don't know, I live in Hendon. To go to Essex is about an hour. And I was not expecting that. And to be honest, super inconvenient, not cool. But I just thought, I can't really throw him out the car. I just said, I'll give you a lift. There was no Ubers in those days. And I just thought, you know what? Man, maybe an example to do an altruistic act. Like, my ego doesn't really want to do it at all. My Yetzer Hara did not want to do it. My Yetzer Hara wanted to chuck him out the car and think, chutzpah, how are you asking the rabbi to go to Essex? But I actually said, wow, what a chance, maybe, to do something a little bit altruistic. Because I think sometimes when we do things which are inconvenient, which your Yetzer Hara doesn't want to do, that could be an act of altruism. And dafka, we do the opposite, my friends. Sometimes we say, really inconvenient, really to have guests tonight, really to go my extra way. Dafka, do it then. That's when you should do it. The things which, you know, if one of you like single guys in Tel Aviv are like wants to invite all the beautiful girls to your house on Friday night, don't give me, that was a really altruistic act. Who are you kidding, right? But if you want to invite people and then the last minute you get a call for some people maybe you don't even like too much saying, I've got nowhere to go this Friday night and I've got a few friends, and then you say, okay, yalla, come, now we're talking. To go out of your comfort zone, to do things from your soul, not from your ego. Now we can access an element of altruism. So that was example number one. Example number two, in my mother's street in Golders Green in Elmcroft Crescent, there's a hero there. There's a holy, 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 holy woman called Nechama Baker. And what she does, and she's apparently been doing it for years, and she's risen to the opportunity in COVID times, she literally knocks on the doors and says, I'm going shopping, can I get anything from you? You know, so my mum, who was, you know, lost her husband, my dad passed away a few months ago. She is just, every time she cooks, she calls my mum, do you want anything? Can I get you anything? Can I bring you anything? She is just like a meals on wheels, literally, and just tzadikah. Like, who does that? Who every time she cooks, every time she shops, she's thinking of others. That's unbelievable. We normally shop. I really don't like to shop. But we shop for ourselves. She's literally shopping for others, cooking for others. I'm sure it's inconvenient. When I'm sure it's a hassle. When I'm sure it's tired. And I'm sure, yes, it makes her soul feel good. But I've literally seen a holy woman walking up and down the street, doing acts of kindness, right, left and center, altruistically. Unbelievable. So that's example number two. Example number three, a guy called Roy Klein. Roy Klein was born in 1975 in Netanya, I think. He was then in Givati, in Yeshiva. And he rose very high up in the Israeli army. In 2006, during the Lebanon War, he's now looking after his unit. He's the commander of his unit. And they get an ambush from Hezbollah. Hezbollah is now ambushing them. And they threw a grenade over the wall, and he had his unit there. And Roy Klein does the following. He jumps on the hand grenade. And he says over his speaker, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Roy Klein met. Roy Klein's died. He announced his death to everyone. He saved his unit, and he was prepared to kill himself. Now, my dear friends, if that isn't altruistic, I don't know what is. We're capable of that. In a way, for Avram Avinu to kill his son was even more a level of altruism. Because that was even harder than to take the bullet yourself. So, our Avos HaKadoshim, but Roy Klein, you know, the idea of caring more about his friends, again, in an instinctive way, if that isn't altruism, I don't know what is. And then, as my daughter commented, the Torah itself gives a definition of altruism. And that's called chesed shel emet. To do kindness, true kindness. Who for? For people that have passed away. In fact, one of the highest mitzvahs is called a met mitzvah. A met mitzvah, to go and bury the dead. When someone passes away, one of the biggest mitzvahs you can do is to bury the dead. That's the number one mitzvah. Everything else has got to stop for that. And by the way, that's why, for me, when my father passed away, and in Hashem's wisdom, he didn't let the coroner release him, and my dad was stuck in a fridge for days and days and days. It was one of the most painful things in my life, because I understood the spiritual responsibility of not just burying the dead, but burying your father was huge. And that was kind of the one thing my dad asked me to do, is like look after that side of it. And I was, beyond anguish. It was too much, because I understood the spiritual nature of it, because that's the number one mitzvah. And when you bury the dead, you're not expecting anything back. Again, when you do a mitzvah for someone alive, you've always in the back of your mind, he owes me one. And by the way, my dear friends, never say those words. Like, you do someone a mitzvah and they say, you owe me one. You just spoiled it. Spoiled it the moment you say you owe me one. Really, really bad idea. So, but on the other hand, if we say, when someone passes away, let's still do a mitzvah for them, you expect nothing back. The Torah calls that chesed shalamet. So for me, one of my chilling and inspiring stories happened to some friends of mine, and this is what happened. Let me share with you this really for me, like, miraculous story. Happened in 2004, you can correct me, but John and Paul and Lincoln went off to Thailand for a holiday, as you do in the winter holidays, chilling out, finding themselves and having a cool time. And it was the last day of holidays. And one of the big differences in men and women, and again, come to my Kabbalah of Love class if you want to hear about the differences between men and women and how we're meant to have happy spiritual relationships. One of the differences is men are fantasists and dreamers and say, I'm going to do so many things, and end up oversleeping. So on that last day of holiday, the way John tells it, he was sleeping in bed, he overslept, he's late. Lincoln calls him up and says, John, get out of bed. It's our last day of holiday. We've got so much to do. And now we already can't do a third of the stuff. Get out now, John. And John's like, sure, Lincoln. Put the phone down, went back to sleep, as you do. Lincoln calls him up 20 minutes later, said, right, that's it. I'm coming down to you. And he saw Lincoln was a little bit upset, and he thought, I better get dressed. And John Cohen quickly got dressed, and he was like on the beach, and like in the kind of barracks on the beach, sleeping on the beach. And he then went up to the hotel, and that time Lincoln comes down. He's gone up, Lincoln's come down. And my dear friends, tragically, that's when the tsunami, which killed so many thousands of people, came to Thailand, and my friends got caught up in it. And John is now up in the hotel, watching the carnage, watching hell, watching the nightmare of all nightmares, thinking, how am I going to get my friends? How am I going to get my friends? How am I going to get Lincoln, Paul? A few hours later, Paul does come to the hotel. Paul's life was saved. Paul was literally held onto some branches, and miraculously he was saved. But now you got Paul and John thinking, how are we going to find Lincoln? And it didn't look good at all. And how I got a phone call the next day, one of my students, David from Finchley, called me up saying, Rabbi, you taught us that the number one mitzvah of all is what we've learned now. It's called Met Mitzvah, burying the dead. I'm sure, he died yesterday. But there's no way I'm going to leave him to be unburied in Thailand. I need to go and find him. I want to go and help him. I want to go and find his body. And I said, David, how the heck are you going to find? How are you going to find him? It's like a needle in a haystack. You don't even know where the haystack is. It's too many people. Like, forget about it. And David said, no, I'm going to do it. It's the right thing to do. And he got on a plane, and he went with John and Paul, and they started walking up and down beaches. And my dear friends, there were bodies piled up. You couldn't even probably recognize who it was, but they were prepared to go through this hellish sight, going up and down beaches, in and out of morgues, watching bodies piled up. Is that Lincoln? Is that Lincoln? They couldn't find Lincoln. And he called me up Friday morning saying, Rabbi, what was I thinking about? I said, no, David, you're there now. You're there now. Try one more last time. Give some charity. Put on your tefillin. You should have a bracha to find Lincoln. And when Shabbos comes in, then you've got to stop looking, and then you'll come home. If after Shabbos you haven't found him, have a emunah that you'll find him. And they continued looking. In the very last morgue that they went to in Phuket, They walked into this morgue and they saw the bodies, and it was a strange sight because there was some Israelis. The Zakah service were actually in that morgue. It was the first time they came across the Israelis, and they spotted the Jews, and now they're having all the Jew talk and like, what are you doing here? And they're saying we lost a friend. And David looked and saw a sight that he hadn't seen in that past week. He saw one of the bodies, an arm was like raised. He said, that's strange. I said, could this be a sign? And he went up to the body and he saw, maybe it could have been Lincoln. A bit connected to this week's Parsha, one thing he could see is that he was circumcised. There wasn't many circumcised men in Thailand who were on the beaches. And that was already, wow, maybe it really is him. What do we do? They told Zakah, what do we do to find out if this is Lincoln? And they said, you know what, fax through the dental record. So they called up Lincoln's mother, Mrs. Abrahams, and she's now, can you imagine, the mother of the son? And she's like been waiting frantically, you're going to find my son. And now finally David's calling her and she goes, have you found him? Have you found him? And he goes, well, we don't know, but you know what, if you can fax through the dental records. And they faxed through the dental records. And lo and behold, and miraculously, that was Lincoln. Hashem found a miracle and made a miracle, and they found Lincoln, and they waited till after Shabbos and they brought him back. On the Sunday and on the Monday, he had a funeral for thousands of people back in London. And why I share with you this story is just imagine the love that David and John had for their friend and Paul. They were not willing to let their friend be cast away and never be buried. They were willing to go through that pain barrier, go through the impossible, walk up and down beaches for no gain of themselves. In fact, it was horrific. Horrific. You're going to need counseling as a result. But that's what you do for a friend. That's what Hashem has given within us, the capacity to be altruistic. We can be altruistic. We have that ability. And when we are, miracles happen. Yeah, one final story. A bit more closer to home. You know, so my sister, super incredible holy woman, and again it's connected because her name is Rivka, and we're going to learn about this. Rivka is the chesed. It's kind of like female Abraham. You know, Abraham's male chesed, Rivka's female chesed, Yitzchak's male gevura. Sarah in this week is female gevura, which is justice. So Rebecca, anyone with the name Rivka really has a giving capacity. But you know, my sister's really a very, very special soul. A few years back, she has a baby. But he was born with brain damage. And they hoped for many, many years. But after 14 months, the hospital said to my sister and her husband, Motti, sorry, you've got to say goodbye to your baby. He's not going to make it now. You've got to say goodbye. They were in Cambridge Hospital and they had to say goodbye. And the worst thing ever for a mother to say goodbye and a father to their child. To Simi, they said goodbye. And again, how holy my sister is, the way she broke the news to her children. Again, she's so insightful, so deep. She sits them down and says a story. She says, I want to tell you a story. Hashem, he once gave this beautiful, this is the story my sister said. He said there was a best friend and he had a diamond. And he was going away on holidays. So he said to his best friend, please look after the diamond for me, but don't go so attached to it because one day I'm going to come back for it. And 14 months later, he comes back and says, it's time, I want to take my diamond back now. Can you imagine the insight and wisdom of my sister? She says to her kids, Hashem gave us the most beautiful diamond called Simi. Hashem's asked for him back now. So we've got to let him go back to Gan Eden. He's actually buried right next to my father. And you can imagine how distraught they were, how devastated. A few months later, I kid you not, a few months later, she gets a phone call from a friend. Says, Rebecca, what do we do? There's been a baby born into the Royal Free Hospital to a very religious family with a similar condition to Simi, but the mother can't take it. The mother's having a breakdown. The mother's given the baby back to social services and it's going to be brought up, who knows, by the state. Rebecca says, give me a few minutes. She chats with her husband, Motti. She says, well, it's a sign from Hashem. Hashem's given us another chance to look after, the way she called it, a world to come baby. And for the next 2.5 years, Rebecca and Moti just selflessly, altruistically looked after another baby's child as if it was their own, in and out of hospitals again, caring again, the whole family getting involved in genuinely caring. Unbelievable. And that is the opposite of what most people do. They're wounded, they go into themselves, they become even more selfish and become even more self-indulgent, and my sister went the opposite. And again, for me, another remarkable act of altruism. And that's what I wanted to share with you, that we are capable of altruism. We're capable, we're spiritually capable. Hashem has given us an neshama, just like Hashem is altruistic. So just to finish off with 2 points. Let's take a lesson from Elijah the prophet. Eliyahu Novi says, there's a line we're meant to say every day. We're meant to say, Mosai yagiu ma'asai la'avoisai. When will my actions reach the actions of our forefathers? Every day we're meant to say, 1 minute, Avraham did that. When am I going to start living like Avraham? Yitzhak did. For the girls to say, Sarah achieved that. She achieved higher levels of prayer than Abraham. Rebecca achieved the most incredible acts of kindness. Rachel and Leah achieved incredible royalty and majesty and balance. We're meant to be saying, when can I emulate them? And you could ask, as Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Baditchev, the Kedushas Levi, how can we ask that? Surely they're on a whole different level. That's the angels. Nayon. How can we compare ourselves to them? Explains the Kedushas Levi. If Eliyahu Novi is saying we're meant to compare ourselves to them, it means we can. Because the fact that they achieved it, we've got their DNA in us. Where do you think we come from? We come from a Moshe Rabbeinu. We come from Avram Avinu, Sarah Imenu. They're our great-grandparents. We have that capacity within us, and that's why we can ask. And obviously the job isn't to be like them, the job is to be like us. That Hashem isn't going to say, why weren't you like Avram? He's going to say, did you activate your potential to the same level as they did? But more than that, some of their traits we have within us. And we're meant to say that. And just to finish off with, King David says, Olam chesed yiboneh. And the first way we understand that is Hashem said he built the world on kindness. The world is built for kindness. Because Hashem is kind, our job to keep the world sustained is to be kind. But a thought I had is he said the word Yiboneh will be rebuilt. And there's a song we sung, Yiboneh HaMikdash. The temple will be rebuilt. And this is what I'm a firm believer of based on the Talmud. That says the temple was destroyed because of baseless hatred. What's going to Yiboneh HaMikdash will be Olam Chesed. A world of kindness. Now, during COVID times, what an opportunity to do kindness. It shouldn't be a time for isolation. It should be a time of giving, of caring for those in isolation. It should be a time of more association. And chesed, every time we shop, we can shop for someone who needs it. Every time we can cook for someone who needs it. When we have a Shabbat meal, if we can't invite people, we should feel aggrieved that we can't have a Shabbat, we can't share it with people. It's such an opportune time for chesed, which we're capable of. So let's not be cynical in this cynical world. That's what's called the Olam Deshakra, the world of lies. We can rise above that. We have the capacity because we are children of Hashem. We have the capacity of being truly kind, genuinely kind, and Be'ez Hashem, if enough of us. Because won't take a lot. Mashiach's nearly there. We're just waiting for the Kiddush cup just to get to the very top. It's 99% there. It's just waiting for the last few drops of chesed. Be'ez Hashem, when we do that, Olam chesed, then Yiboneh HaMikdash. Be'ez Hashem, Hashem, when we build the temple. Be'ez Hashem very soon. And for my dear friends in Tel Aviv, I look forward to seeing you super soon.